Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's Rosh Mohammed Salih here, the editor of Five Pillars, and this is the big picture. Apologies, I haven't done a big picture show in quite a few weeks now, but I had to do one this week because something big is happening on Thursday, but we'll get back to that soon. This isn't a live show. Normally I do this live. I live stream it so that I can interact with you guys, so that I can read out your comments, bounce off them, with my guests, etc., etc. But this time, I'm not doing it live, so you can't leave any comments, and that's because of my schedule this week. I just find it a little bit difficult to do the show live. But what's happening on Thursday? Well, it's the Batley and Spen parliamentary by-election. It might not sound wonderful, but it's actually really crucial for Muslims in this country. It's perhaps one of the few chances that we actually get to have as a community to make an impact on the national scene, because usually stuff is being done to us, we're reacting to stuff, we're firefighting, but for once we might have a chance to actually shape the national conversation. That's quite rare. So the Batley and Spen by-election was called because the incumbent Labour candidate basically has gone off to do another job and doubled their wages, etc., etc. So it's a vacant seat. It's traditionally been a Labour seat, but this election is very, very interesting. We have three main candidates. There's many candidates, but let's talk about the three main ones. The first one is Ryan Stevenson, who is the Conservative candidate, who's kept a very, very, very low profile. We don't know much about him and his policies, and he's deliberately kept a low profile because basically he wants Labour and George Galloway to fight it out and take votes off each other. That's what his best path to victory is, and he is the favourite to win on Thursday. Then we have the Labour candidate, Kim Leadbeater, who is the sister of Joe Cox, who was murdered a few years ago by a white nationalist extremist. Now, Kim Leadbeater, basically, again, she's kept a fairly low profile, not like Ryan Stevenson, but she has limited her interviews, put it that way. I think she only became a Labour Party member quite recently, and it looks like Labour have chosen her as a kind of sympathy vote candidate. People will remember that she's the sister of Joe Cox. And finally, the third main candidate is George Galloway, a very well-known figure nationally, obviously known for his pro-Palestine activism and being anti the Iraq War, and generally his pro-Muslim activism in the past. And that has been slightly countered by the fact that, he's been an MP, he's benefited from the Muslim vote twice, but some Muslims would say he hasn't really done much for Muslims in those constituencies. There are some concerns with his position on the Uyghurs, on Syria, and just taking kind of a right-wing bent path in recent years, which has surprised quite a few people. So today we're going to talk about what the best options for Muslims are on Thursday, what they should do, how they should vote. But first of all, I visited Batley on Friday and I had quite an eventful trip. Take a look at this.
Everywhere you look at it, all roads come back to Labour. The anger is palpable against Labour in both parts of the community. There are more than two parts, but the white English working class part and the Asian community part, anger against Labour is visceral.
The question I have, and I've travelled up from Birmingham today because I have deep-rooted issues. I have deep-rooted issues with the... excuse me, sir, I'm having a conversation. Please don't block my path. I think it's the wrong person to block here. I have deep-rooted issues with the Labour Party and why Keir Starmer has done a U-turn on the people of Kashmir and our indigenous issue, our indigenous movement of the Kashmiri cause being an international issue. Why, as a British Kashmiri, as somebody who has been supportive of Labour Party, whose family has gone out and canvassed for Labour Party, what do you think that us Muslims are going to give you our vote just without your words?
Guys,
are having to answer for him.
Guys,
I'm coming with a question. Answer the question. I would like to know.
Kim,
why.
you can't answer the guy. How
I've come from Birmingham. How are you? I've come from Birmingham. I'm respectfully asking you a
Don't do
simple
that. Come on,
question.
man. This is a free country. Don't block my path.
Answer the question.
It's not funny. We don't find it funny. We'd like you to answer.
Go
ahead, Kim.
One second, please let her answer.
Go ahead, Kim.
There hasn't been a U-turn on Kashmir, so you need to
Well, I apologize with all due respect. By you even saying that, you are trampling on the life of martyrs who have forced down LGBT indoctrination to children. What do you feel? How do you feel about Muslim parents who don't want their children to learn? Because I'm very angry. I'm very upset.
Let us speak.
I apologize if I'm coming across some shouting.
Go ahead, Kim. Go ahead, Kim.
Muslim parents who don't want their children to learn about sensitive sexual relationships. Are you going to stand for those Muslim parents now?
You know what? I'm not going to stand. You shouting at me.
The floor is
An innocent
yours.
woman who has put herself forward.
Go ahead, Kim.
Life.
No one's going to interrupt you now.
This is where I live. This is my community. Don't come here and shout at me in the street. The Muslim community of Batley and Spen deserve better than this. They deserve better than this.
We're the community.
I'm asking you, are you going to support Muslim parents who don't want their children to learn about LGBT indoctrination? Are you supporting those kids? Answer the question. How are you running? Kim, I'm here to talk to you. Are you going to support Muslim parents who don't want their children to learn about it? So speak to this gentleman. We are going to chase Labour. We are going to chase Labour at every step. We are going to chase Labour. We are going to out your lies.
So fun and games there in Batley on Friday between Shakil Afsar, a well-known activist from Birmingham, and Kim Leadbeater. That is kind of a shorter version of what actually happened. Go on the Five Pillars YouTube page to see the full entire video. But it caused a stink. Boy, did it cause a stink. Labour immediately pinned it on George Galloway, even though George Galloway had nothing to do with what happened. Basically, Shakil Afsar was certainly not put up to what he did by George Galloway, but Labour had to do their little propaganda and obviously play on the fact that Kim Leadbeater's sister was murdered and insinuate that there was some kind of physical threat when there wasn't. But of course, all the media kind of amplified that message, which was completely and utterly untrue. Labour leader Keir Starmer, basically, you can see his tweet here, blaming it on Galloway. And then Galloway kind of responded with threats of legal action, which he often does. Now, I went up to Batley on Friday with a fellow journalist, Robert Carter, and I spoke to him a little bit earlier about, what happened on Friday. Take a listen to what he had to say. So, Robert, you and me went up to Batley on Friday, and there was this incident outside the mosque with Shakil Afsar and Kim Leadbeater. And it got spun in quite a shocking way, I thought, because what the media was saying isn't what you and me saw, was it?
No, not at all. It's another example of the mainstream media getting it wrong once again. And this isn't the first time that I've seen it happen. So ultimately, when we went there, we were faced with a situation where both George Galloway and also the Labour candidate were in the same position at the same time. So we literally did the right thing. We went to the exact mosque where we needed to be, and we weren't even quite sure where the candidates would be on the day. Got there, everything was going perfect, and both candidates were obviously trying to reach out to Muslims as they piled out of the mosque. It was Medina Masjid, I believe, was the one we were outside after Juma prayers. And obviously there was the clash between an outspoken critic of the Labour Party, a Muslim who travelled all the way up from Birmingham. And after that was filmed and Kim decided to essentially storm off, I believe she stormed off after failing to handle what was essentially legitimate criticism being thrown her way by, a disgruntled former member of the Labour Party. All of a sudden, tweets started coming up and headlines coming out by certain media platforms stating that a George Galloway supporter had essentially heckled and chased off the Labour candidate. And I can verify 100%. George Galloway, although he was on the scene, he wasn't, standing across the road. He was on the same side of the road. He wasn't laughing and enjoying necessarily the scenes as it was happening. And the most key point of all, Shakil Afsar is the name of the gentleman who chased off or, heckled, if you like, the Labour candidate. He is not a member of George Galloway's campaign, and I don't believe he even describes himself as a George Galloway supporter.
No, I think George was slagging him off, actually, afterwards, calling him an extremist and stuff. So he didn't have anything to do with George Galloway whatsoever. I mean, you and me both asked Kim Leadbeater or Leadbeater, I don't even know how to pronounce her name. We asked her for an interview prior to all this. And they just fobbed us off. I mean, her people fobbed us off and said, no, you got to go through the press office. But I mean, I went through the press office. They didn't even reply. I mean, they always come to me when they want something, when they want to get a Keir Starmer message out to Muslims. But when you want something back, they just mug you off. And Kim Leadbeater really didn't want, it wasn't just me or you, it was other journalists as well. She really didn't want to speak to anybody but prior approved journalists, which is crazy. I mean, you know, this is like a tough game, politics. I can understand kind of vetting who's going to interview you if it's like a studio interview or back in your office. But when you're out on the street, anything goes, I'm afraid, you know, and you should take questions from anybody. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cowardly on her part not to give an interview.
Absolutely. And I've got two things that I want to mention since, you know, I was there and we saw how things happened. Number one, the fact of the matter is what you're saying is absolutely right. The Labour Party is absolutely despised by huge segments of the Muslim community up and down the country, simply because, you know, they felt deeply betrayed by the Labour Party, especially after what happened to Jeremy Corbyn, who was arguably one of the most pro-Muslim MPs, if you like, that has ever led the party. The way he was handled and everything that's happened since then under Keir Starmer's leadership, Muslims feel deeply betrayed and upset by that. And Muslims have an absolute right to voice those legitimate concerns. They shouldn't be linked to extremism just because, you know, they said something that a particular candidate, in this case Kim in Batley and Spen, didn't like. The fact of the matter is her sister, who was murdered by a right-wing extremist and terrorist, that obviously is an upsetting incident, and no one condones or everyone feels for Joe Cox's family and all of that. That doesn't even need to be said. That's a fact. But the fact that Shakil, a Muslim who voiced his concerns after, you know, quitting the party after the feeling of betrayal that was felt by him, he's now being linked to Joe Cox's murderer, who has nothing to do with Muslims, nothing to do with Islam. He was a white right-wing extremist who hated socialism and attacked and lashed out. So why is it that the media would spin it in that way, that a Muslim extremist, and then would refer back to the Joe Cox murder as if it had something to do with what happened in Batley and Spen last Friday? That is totally disgusting.
I think Labour thinks, I think they've obviously chosen Kim as a candidate, going for the sympathy vote, basically, because they were maybe anticipating an incident like this. I mean, they've got Naz Shah MP and Afzal Khan MP from Manchester and Bradford to come along to kind of bolster her up and help her kind of deal with the Muslims, I guess. And they're actually, they were offering themselves for interview, but they're not the candidates. We want to speak to Kim, not to candidates from other parts of the country. And I just think that they've clearly gone for the sympathy vote, you know, because of the Joe Cox thing. And it's a deliberate strategy. But look, Shakil wasn't carrying a knife. He wasn't carrying a gun. And this idea that she was chased to her car, I mean, come on. You know, she walked to her car and the media followed and other people followed because we were having a conversation. She just kind of walked off. I mean, I do think Shakil should have let her speak. I think that was a mistake on the part of Shakil. He should have let her speak. I can understand her not wanting to engage as well, but she wasn't chased. I mean, in that throng of people, Robert, I think you'll agree, there may have been one or two George Galloway supporters, but ultimately it was a conversation or a confrontation between Shakil and Kim and no one else. And there were loads of journalists there, and there were also loads of Labour supporters there. So that was the context of this throng of people. But the way it's been reported in the media, angry men shouting at Kim Leadbeater, chasing her down the street and all that. And they're obviously trying to pin this on George Galloway. I mean, I'm not a fan of George Galloway. I don't know what your views on George Galloway are. I'm personally not a fan. I'm certainly not supporting him in this election. But facts are facts. It was not his fault. He didn't engineer this. He had nothing to do with this. And Labour are just literally lying and spinning in the most despicable way just to put one on Galloway.
Yeah, well, I think it is a little bit scandalous. George Galloway's actually come out with a lot of other accusations which potentially suggests that Labour Party figures and members are conspiring to make up lies to try and derail his campaign. And these lies include things like trying to suggest that he is basically behaving like an extremist himself and trying to rile up a mob of fanatics to essentially target the candidate, things like that. He has also accused Labour activists as well of even targeting his own George Galloway's headquarters, which he claims are all not being reported and things like that. So without a doubt, the Batley and Spen by-election is deteriorating into a bit of a mess. But the problem is Labour are complaining that they are the victims and it's not their fault. Ultimately, they're blaming British Muslims, saying that it's fanatical British Muslims linked to Galloway's campaign that are causing all the problems. Actually, from what I saw, it looks like it's the opposite. It looks like Labour might be causing a lot of the problems rather than fixing problems in a constituency which they're looking to lose quite badly, by the way. It looks like they're actually causing new problems for themselves. Pathetic and poor leadership.
What do you make, Robert,
definitely.
of the accusation that outsiders, like you and me, I guess, are coming into the constituency, stirring up trouble, stirring up tension, and it's leading to these unsavory incidents? And they also said there was an incident over the weekend where Labour supporters were egged or something. Is it all our fault, outsiders?
Well, to be honest, I think, it's not illegal for people outside of Batley to come in and campaign. I mean, you and me are not there to campaign. We were there to cover the news. So, I mean, if something happened on the day, as journalists, we caught the story, and it was great from a journalistic perspective to have caught the drama on camera and been in the right place at the right time. But, I mean, come on, everyone does it. Labour is pulling in all their resources to try and bring in outside elements to try and sway the locals to vote in their favour. So this is ridiculous. Obviously, any physical attacks like the egging that took place is not acceptable. Allegedly took place. But I'm
sorry, I'm saying that because given that Labour has lied, and we've seen it with our own eyes, I literally need the police to confirm that incident. If the police confirm it and people are charged, all right, fair enough. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but to take Labour's word for it and regurgitate that as fact is not something I'm willing to do. So allegedly.
And that's the thing. What we saw on the day was clearly dodgy, and possibly the Labour candidate was, because she gave an interview, I think, to Byline, which was the platform that shared the anti-Galloway. They spun the story to be anti-Galloway from the very beginning.
They should be ashamed of themselves, Byline Times, because they've really got the story wrong and they won't admit it. They need to just, everyone makes mistakes, but when you make a mistake, put your hands up, admit it, and apologize and move on. They're not doing that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Even Kim gave an interview after the incident, and a lot of the things she said in the interview, okay, maybe she was traumatized, you could say, because she did obviously storm off and was clearly feeling high on emotions after the incident. But a lot of the things she said in the interview to the media afterwards was not actually true. And George Galloway mentioned that in many tweets afterwards, that like she accused him of standing on the other side of the street laughing as she was like chased off the scene by these angry Muslims. No, it didn't happen. It did not happen. We were there. You and I filmed the incident from start to finish. It did not happen. That was factually untrue. Kim, maybe she said it and didn't realize it was untrue. Maybe that's what she thought happened, but it was fake news, and it was peddled by the media. And even her own party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, weighed in to the incident. Even though he wasn't there, he didn't have a clear grasp of the facts, and he again demonized Galloway. And again, I'm not saying that I'm not a member of Galloway's campaign or anything, but as a journalist, we saw fake news being peddled by the establishment. It was started by Byline, adopted by Labour, and they were spreading fake news. So Galloway is well within his rights to potentially, I guess, sue the party if they don't apologise for that, because Kim was wrong, Keir Starmer was 100 million% wrong, and a lot of other media platforms and Twitter trolls, whatever, were also deeply wrong. But final point I want to mention on this before we end. As you said earlier, you contacted Kim and the Labour campaign in advance, letting them know that you were interested in speaking to them, to give her a chance to air her views to what is essentially a Muslim viewership. You and I, we represent considerable Muslim viewership. I also messaged Kim directly on several occasions, and I attempted to reach her through backdoor means as well, through other activists within the party who I knew could potentially get in touch with her. And I made very clear, I am a British Muslim who represents a Muslim news channel and has a significant Muslim viewership. If you speak to us, we will give you a fair shake and you will get a chance to get your message out to Muslims. We will interview all candidates. We are not taking sides in this, but if you want to speak to Muslims, here's your chance. She ignored us all the way, and when we showed up on the day, she failed to speak her chance. And then she claims, well, it's outrageous that she's being heckled. Well, she didn't give a chance when she had it to speak to Muslims without, the heated situation taking place.
Well, I mean, you might not be taking sides, but I certainly am. And this is not this platform, the big picture, is not a impartial. We're partisan. We stick up for Muslims. We champion Muslims. And I can tell you what I want to, happen on Thursday. I want Labour to lose. And I think, there are no good options with the other candidates. I wouldn't vote for Galloway personally. I wouldn't vote for the Tories personally. But I would vote for anybody if that meant Labour would lose, or not vote, because even that would be taking votes away from Labour, because Muslims are traditionally Labour. And it's purely to send a message out. These guys have mugged us off for too long. They've shown us contempt with contempt. They've expelled so many of us from the Labour Party. I was never a Labour Party member. I think you were. They expelled you effectively without a fair trial, without a fair hearing. They've really treated us with complete contempt. This shift towards Israel, this shift towards India at the expense of Kashmir, all this, and just the very fact that they slaughtered the Labour riot embodied by Keir Starmer, absolutely slaughtered Jeremy Corbyn. That still sticks in my gut, quite frankly. So I really hope Labour does lose. I think if they win, I have to say this, it's a real indictment of British Muslims. If we still ensure a Labour victory, after everything they've done for us, then I must admit I will lose faith in a lot of members of my own community, and I don't want that to happen, and I don't believe it will happen. What's your final take on this, Robert? What do you want to happen on Thursday?
Well, I will also admit I was a former Labour member. I'm very disgruntled when I was there, and obviously I basically left and accused the party of being anti-Palestine and Islamophobic and racist against Arabs and things like that, which I think there's plenty of people who would agree with me in stating that fact on Labour now under Keir Starmer since he took over. But at the end of the day, I do agree that Labour needs to be punished. And a lot of people are saying now that, oh, how dare you not back Labour? At the end of the day, you're giving the seat to the Tories. How dare you? You're a Tory supporter. Well, at the end of the day, the Tories already run the country, and they have a significant majority because Labour are so pathetic, weak and abysmal, and have failed on so many levels since the past couple of years, I guess you could say. So at the end of the day, Labour is already a disgrace, and they are digging an even deeper hole for themselves. And the only way they could possibly be rattled out of this hole, dug out of this hole, is perhaps if they are punished so severely that they are forced to admit defeat and start to acknowledge the legitimate concerns of key supporters of the party, like British Muslims, for example. So that's the message I have. Don't allow anyone to talk us down and claim that we are some kind of agents of the Tory party trying to derail Labour, because even if Labour did win this by-election, the Tories would still be ruling the country. Labour need to be punished. Muslims need to wake up. And I really hope that the result of this by-election will be a crushing defeat for Labour, and that will force Keir Starmer to face a leadership contest, in which case the party could be salvaged in the future.
All right. Jazakallah khair, Robert. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Wa alaikum salam.
Okay, that was Robert Carter. Now, often, the local Labour activists anyway, they're accusing outsiders from outside Batley of coming in and causing tension and instigating violence, etc., etc. I mean, I was unaware that there was like a wall around the town of Batley and the rest of the United Kingdom. But anyway, we're always accused of, outsiders coming in. So let's talk to a local now. Let's talk to somebody who's actually a community activist. I actually spoke to him a little bit earlier on. His name is Dr. Abdul Basit Sheikh. He's a community activist, lives in Batley. He's going to give us the local angle now. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Abdul Basit. Now, you're a community activist up there in Batley. How's the campaign going? What's your gut feeling? What's going to happen on Thursday? Who's going to win?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Roshan, it's always a pleasure to be on Five Pillars. Interesting question you've actually posed. I think this election is not a foregone conclusion or done deal. There's a possibility of a shock. My analysis of the situation is that Labour is probably in third place or really, really struggling to actually win the seat. I think it's between the Workers' Party, Great Britain, George Galloway versus the Tories.
That is the, I mean, I did see a poll the other day, a Survation poll about a week ago, and it said that the Tories were out in front 47%, Labour 41%, and George Galloway only on 6%, which is the difference between the two main parties. So what gives you this confidence that actually Galloway's in second place?
I'm hearing a lot of people are basically have voted George Galloway in the postal votes, and a lot of people are actually thinking of voting George Galloway on Thursday itself. Is overwhelming pro Galloway, especially in the Muslim areas. Also, the non-Muslim areas, there seems to be a number of people, especially in the forgotten working class estates, who've been abandoned by the two major parties. They're also considering voting George Galloway because he actually bothered to actually knock on their doors, which other parties have failed to do so for such a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I was up there on Friday, and the Conservative candidate was nowhere to be seen, and we did look for him, and we couldn't even see many posters promoting him. It seems like their strategy is to just kind of disappear and let Galloway and Labour fight it out. And as you know, the Labour candidate is refusing interviews from anybody but the most friendly media. How do you think the campaign's going? Because I think as an outsider reading the headlines, it's like, oh, there's loads of tension up there. Outsiders are coming in, you know, kind of building up tension. Is that how you see it? How's the campaign gone?
Well, I think the campaign's gone well. I mean, the Conservatives don't need to do much. They've got a very solid vote bank in two districts in Batley and Spen, Gomersall, Birstall and Birkenshaw. They've got substantial support in what we describe as Spen, the Spen area. In Batley, it's traditionally been Labour, Batley East and Batley West. But I think this time the Labour vote is basically collapsing before our eyes. I mean, for example, Labour have actually visited certain streets or certain areas for 3 days running, just giving the same different leaflets out. I've never ever seen Labour actually visit my street 4 times in 10 days. And when anybody says to them, we're voting Galloway, they say, well, we've got you historically voting as Labour. And that comes as a surprise to see they're keeping those kind of statistics and data armed with them just to basically try and like kind of cajole people into not voting Galloway and voting Labour.
Dr. Abdul-Basit, we know very well that Muslims are angry with Labour over things like Palestine and Kashmir, and also this kind of like anti-Semitism witch hunt which took place in the Corbyn years and is continuing into Starmer. But what about the local issues in Batley? Are they upset about with Labour over the local issues as well, or is it just international issues?
I think Palestine was the main driver. Initially, people basically were really annoyed that Keir Starmer actually refused to go to the iftar after he had actually agreed to do so. So he's actually broken his promise. So that was the initial anger. And then obviously what the scenes that we saw on the international media regarding Palestine, Al-Aqsa, Sheikh Jarrah. So again, you know, Batley and Spen, very passionate support for Palestine, probably more passionate than anywhere else in the country, I would say. And then a lot of resentment has been bubbling for many years that Labour-controlled Kirklees Council and their councillors especially, they've just basically, you know, been taking voters for granted, taking people's votes, not doing lack of action when it comes to dealing with pressing local issues ranging from, you know, speeding cars, for example, drug dealing, antisocial behavior, vandalism, crime, potholes is a big one. General upkeep of the roads and the area. if a casual outsider comes into Batley, they will basically see an abundance of issues staring at them in the face. That's how bad things are in this town.
Mm. What about the argument that, if Labour lose, the inevitable winners are going to be the Tories, and the Tories are worse than Labour? I guess that's the major argument for, not backing Labour. What do you say to that?
Well, as I say, look, it's a risk that most Muslims are going to have to actually take. That inevitably, if you vote Labour again, nothing's going to change. The same old, same old. The Tories, won the seat in Dewsbury. £25 million is actually coming into Dewsbury. We've not had any major capital investment since 1997. So I think, people want money to be invested in this town, high-skilled jobs. They want, big companies to invest here to create jobs for the future. Because, again, I've got a young family. I want the best for my children, and I think a lot of voters want the best for their families and children when it comes to a good healthcare, good education system, good areas to live in, because everybody's bothered about their house prices. They don't want their areas devalued and their house prices plummeting because of this antisocial behavior issues that are evident all the time.
The feeling I got when I went up to Batley on Friday is that the younger generation of Muslims are definitely going to turn against Labour. They're definitely going to turn against Labour. But the older generation that have always voted Labour for many, many years, there's a possibility that some of them will stick with Labour and maybe even ensure a Labour victory. What is your message to that older generation of the Muslim community?
Well, I respect the elders, because the elders laid the foundations in our community. Our community would not be without the contribution of the elders that have passed away and are still with us. But what my appeal to them is that, look, this is a chance of a lifetime. The Labour Party have actually taken us for granted. If Labour lose, it will be a good thing, because they will never take the Muslim vote for granted ever again. They won't think there's a vote bank. They will actually not take us for granted. They will actually work hard for our vote, and they will basically have to work hard in order to ensure that we vote for them and that we don't just put a cross for the sake of putting it on the ballot box.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Basit. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
All right, that was Dr. Abdul Basit Sheikh. Now, often we're accused of being biased and being partisan, and as I've said before, we are biased. We're biased in favor of Muslims, and we're partisan in favor of Muslims. However, we are accurate and we are fair. So, we haven't given much airtime during this show to the two main candidates, I would say, Ryan Stevenson and Kim Leadbeater. So let's, for the sake of balance, let's hear what they have to say.
On the 1st of July, we get to elect a new MP for Batley and Spen. We need someone who understands our local area and cares deeply about our community. I've lived and worked here my whole life, from Hepmondwike to Batley, from Healy to Staincliffe, Gummersall to Liversedge. I've got a proven track record of getting things done, whether that's tackling loneliness, helping people during lockdown who were struggling in food poverty, or simply bringing people together. I would work tirelessly for the people of Batley and Spen on the issues that matter most to them, whether that's getting more police on our streets, cutting down on antisocial behaviour, protecting our green spaces, or bringing good jobs into the area for local people. People have come to our community in the last few weeks trying to sow division. We need an MP who can unite people and bring them together. So on the 1st of July, please do get out and vote for Kim Leadbeater, from Batley and Spen, for Batley and Spen.
I'm Ryan Stevenson, your Conservative candidate in the Batley and Spen by-election. I've been out and about talking to people all over the area, and no matter who they are or what they do, one thing is clear. More and more people are saying it's time for change. It's time to build back better, and I've got a plan to do just that. As your MP, I'll fight for more investment for our high streets, creating good local jobs with decent wages. I'll fight for a greater share of the 20,000 new officers being recruited nationally, so we have more police on the street fighting crime and antisocial behaviour. And I'll work with businesses to deliver more apprenticeships so young people can earn and learn at the same time. But now it all comes down to you. On the 1st of July, your vote can secure the change that we need across Batley and Spenborough. So this time round, please vote Conservative. Together, let's build back better.
Okay, never accuse me of being biased again. Kim Leadbeater and Ryan Stevenson. Now, finally, let's talk to a expert on the Muslim vote, I guess. A guy who I've known for quite a few years now, Imran Shah from MPAC UK. Obviously, MPAC UK is an organization which encourages Muslim participation in the electoral process and generally in British public life. And is also it's an organization which really encourages Muslims to make their voice heard when it comes to voting. So I asked Imran Shah, after I said Salam Alaikum, I asked him, how should Muslims vote? How should Muslims vote on Thursday in Batley and Spen? So Imran, what advice would you give Muslims in terms of how they should vote in Batley and Spen?
So the advice we would give is really consider which candidate, which party is either supporting or your views or taking them for granted. If they're supporting, then you need to vote for them, and if they're exploiting, then you need to essentially teach them a lesson and essentially punish them at the election. In either way, you need to make sure your vote matters. If you vote for a particular party all the time, you become disposable. And I think a lot of Muslims, especially when it comes to the Labour Party, have found themselves disposable and essentially taken for a ride. And we're not the only vote to do that. You know, Scotland, the Scottish vote for decades were taken for granted. And guess what happened? They left and they got the SNP, much to the detriment of Labour. And the Labour still hasn't listened, so I guess they'll need another kicking. And so really what's happening in Batley Spen, you've got a party that locally with the Baradri, Muslim councillors and so on, exploit and neglect the Muslim population, don't give them what they want or what they need. And then you've got the national leadership when it comes to issues like Palestine, like Kashmir, when you've got sort of issues around Islamophobia, they have essentially prioritized Zionists who are essentially inherently Islamophobic and other sort of minorities above and beyond the Muslim concerns. So we need to essentially teach them a lesson. We need to make sure Batley and Spen as a community are leading the way on this by-election, because if Batley and Spen can essentially change the balance of power locally, then it will inspire other Muslim populations to do the same.
So the priority is kicking Labour out?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And so like you need to make sure the logic behind it is not just reactionary. The logic behind it is making sure your vote matters. That's the logic behind it. So even if you get a Tory candidate in, that Tory person is more likely to serve you because they need your vote to win at the next election than essentially
Imran, that would be the major argument against trying to kick Labour out, because George Galloway is not really going to win, is he? I mean, he might get a lot of votes, but all he's going to do is take votes away from Labour. So inevitably, the consequence is that the Tories, who are more Islamophobic than Labour, are going to be in.
Yeah, I mean, look, that argument has its merits, but again, when you look at examples like Steve Baker, if you saw him at the debate on the sanctions against Israel in Parliament, he said the most extraordinary thing. He says that my constituents who are predominantly Muslim on this concerning about this issue are saying that we are being silenced and demonized just for standing up for the justice of Palestinians. That's a hard right Brexiteer, you know what I mean? He is on the hard sort of end of the party. Yet he knows that the Muslims are going to essentially vote him out if he doesn't make the right noises. So at the end of the day, yes, okay, there's the party, but an MP who's going to represent your voice, that's what minorities need to do across the board in order to have influence across all parties, rather than putting all your bets into one party who will eventually exploit it at the end of the day.
What do you make of the media coverage of the election? It seems quite divisive. I mean, I went up there a few days ago, and an incident between, the Labour candidate and Muslim activists was spun every which way you can. And it seems like a lot of the media, anyway, is trying to demonize Muslims and accuse them of extremism and being bigoted, etc., etc. What have you made of it?
Yeah, nothing new, right? I mean, it should be expected, especially when we're demonstrating power. Like, we're not the first minority to be demonized in the UK for demonstrating power, even in the West, right? So we should be expecting it and still be confident and assertive in our ability to organize and demonstrate that power, because that's the only way in which the situation is going to change. If we're going to be reactionary and soft and sort of give that demonization more merit than it's worth, then we're just going to do what we've done for the last 20 years, try and essentially adapt and within their lines of what's comfortable, play good Muslim, bad Muslim sort of thing. And that has to change if we're going to matter on a local, regional, national level. We have to essentially get organized and assert power. So yes, that is the case. It's expected, but ride through it. We've done it for 20 years. Nothing's changed. Now it's time to essentially push forward.
Imran, what do you make of the three main candidates? Ryan Stevenson for the Tories, Kim Leadbeater for the Labour, and George Galloway?
So with the Tories, there's not much record in him. We'll have to, if he does get elected, that's when we'll have to see how he performs, how he positions himself on various different issues. Muslim community shouldn't wait till the next election. They should be straight there, campaigning and lobbying. For Leadbeater, look, credit to her. She's taking on this role, which is going to be a challenge anyway. I do feel that the local Labour Party haven't prepared her well when it comes to various different issues. I don't particularly think she's a Starmanite or she's a Corbynista. I think she is just one of those people that are just generally just Labour. But I think when it comes to very pertinent issues like Palestine, like Kashmir and whatnot, she needed to be briefed properly and she needed to have the right people around it. And I think over the weeks that has been clear that she's not made the right noises, whether she's behind them or not. And as for Galloway, for very strong on Palestine, very sort of divisive when it comes to various other different issues. But this issue is about Palestine, and I think Muslims are rallied around Galloway primarily to punish Labour on Palestine, and I think that's the way that we as Muslims need to start thinking. Look, at the end of the day, what we found, an MP that is pro-Palestinian is going to look after anybody. It's a barometer for humanity. And regardless of party, if you're a Zionist, you're going to scapegoat and exploit, right? Regardless of who you are. So if whoever gets in, whether it's the Leadbeater or the Tory person, if they come out pro-Palestinian, whether out of the pressure of the Muslim community or just because they think it's the principal's thing to do, they're more likely to look after everyone. And that is how we essentially demonstrate power.
Imran, my final question to you is about party politics in general, because online I have seen a few Muslim activists saying that, we're playing the same game over and over again. And, we've been talking about the Muslim vote and the power of the Muslim vote for so long, but, it never really it's always a bit of a damp squib at the end of the day. And Muslims really have to focus not on this engagement policy, but rather, first and foremost, organizing ourselves as a community.
Yeah, look, we would say the same thing. When you are organized, that's when you demonstrate power. It's not enough to be awake to the problem. You've got to organize. But part of that self-organizing, you don't organize in a silo. Even when it comes to Zionists, they don't just organize amongst themselves. They try and find partnerships. They broaden their influence, and that's how they press. That's why they're in the position that they're in. So if you're looking to be successful in pushing your agenda, whatever that may be, look at Palestine. We need a broad alliance. So yes, we do need to self-organize. We see that in Batley, you know, like usually it's like Impact UK or another Muslim organization going in, knocking on doors, mobilizing, leading from the front. What we see in Batley, a lot of it is self-organized. And that's the kind of stuff that we want to see, because it means that Muslims are no longer just awake to the problem, they're taking action, and then they're self-organizing. So it's not either or, it's both. But primarily, we've got to be organized amongst ourselves, build our own civil society, fund organizations that are supporting our voices. And then we start expanding and reaching out for partners and allies.
Okay, and finally, really briefly, what do you want to see happen on Thursday?
So ideally, I want to see a complete reduction of the Labour vote. I'm not too fussed whether Labour or Tory get it, but I want it to be close, because it sends a message either way that if you want the Muslim vote, which can change seats, then you're going to have to respect the issue of Palestine, Kashmir, and so on. And that's how we bring it into the mainstream. And that's how we push forward and pressure.
Okay.
Thank you. Barakallahu feek.
Okay, that was Imran Shah. Let me do my conclusion now before I finish the show. So, how should Muslims vote? Well, it's pretty obvious from all of our guests which way they should vote. I just want to conclude now by saying that, you know, I'm not a voter. I've hardly ever voted in my life. I voted twice. I voted for Jeremy Corbyn because I felt there was a definite benefit for Muslims in voting for him. And I voted for Brexit. I won't go into why, but I did vote for Brexit. And, well, it was basically so that, you know, Britain would start to think internally rather than externally, which I think is what basically we should do. We should focus on our own country, the education and the health and the welfare of our own people, rather than having these wars abroad all the time. And I think Brexit will help Britain in the long term do that. But that's another tangent entirely. I'm not generally a voter. I know that there is a difference of opinion Islamically on voting in non-Muslim countries. The vast majority do say that it's permissible. And obviously I'm not a scholar, so I seek guidance from scholars and I go with what the scholars say. And therefore I have a pretty pragmatic view when it comes to Muslims voting in elections in the UK. And that is that if there's no benefit, then don't vote, and that is probably the majority of the time. But if there is a clear benefit, then I think, you know, we can use any means at our disposal, any halal means at our disposal to advance the cause of Muslims in this country. I would say first and foremost that I think our focus shouldn't be on party politics. I think that's gone, you know, with Jeremy Corbyn, whatever, it's gone. Our focus should be on organizing our own community, making our own institutions strong, creating a strong Muslim lobby. And I think the mainstream is far more likely to listen to a strong Muslim voice than a weak and divided Muslim voice. So I would say, brothers and sisters, our focus should definitely not be on advancing the Muslim cause within the mainstream Conservative Party, well, God forbid, the Labour Party and other political parties. However, there may be exceptions to that rule. And I'm not a fundamentalist when it comes to this issue. And I think there is a difference between strategy and tactics. The strategy is the overall goal that we have and the strategy we should employ to basically advance the Muslim cause in this country, and that is by organizing ourselves. But we can use tactics on the way, halal tactics, like, for example, supporting political parties in certain circumstances. And I think here in Batley and Spen, there is a clear maslaha, there's a clear benefit for Muslims, and that is to punish Labour. Ultimately, the Tories will do what they want. You know, they have nothing to do with us whatsoever. But there is a battle for the soul of Labour between the right and the left. And the left of Labour do have some policies that benefit Muslims. And therefore, I think that perhaps Muslims should occasionally be in this fight for the soul of Labour. And I think here we have a clear chance and opportunity to influence the trajectory of Labour in the near future, putting Keir Starmer under a lot of pressure, perhaps kind of boosting the left of Labour. I haven't got rose-tinted spectacles. I don't believe in kind of putting all my eggs in one basket and having any faith in the Labour Party to deliver anything positive for Muslims in this country. But there's a possibility that they might deliver a few things, like less wars, a bit more in terms of the equitable distribution of wealth in this country. And obviously we know that most Muslims are on the bottom end of the socio-economic ladder. So I would say to especially those older Muslims that are thinking of keeping with Labour, you've got to understand this party is basically laughing at us. It's mugging us off, over Kashmir, over Palestine, over, the witch hunt, the anti-Semitism witch hunt. It doesn't listen to us, doesn't care about us. Even yesterday, the Labour Muslim Network, which is within the Labour Party, they tweeted that Labour hadn't even consulted them over Batley and Spen. These guys are laughing at us. They don't care about us. And therefore, we have to punish them at the ballot paper. And I would say that, vote for anybody but Labour. I'm not supporting any candidates. I'm not endorsing any candidate. Just vote for anybody but Labour, or don't vote at all, because that is basically taking votes away from Labour too. Does it mean a Tory win? Probably. But ultimately, it's 2.5 years more to the next general election. What is one Tory candidate in Batley and Spen going to do in 2.5 years? Then there's another election. And ultimately, the Tory party is a lost cause for us. And it's quite frankly, a price worth paying to punish Labour is getting the Tories in. And I think most Muslims realise that. So, there's only a few days to go before the Batley and Spen by-election. Put pressure on people who have a vote in Batley, encourage them. This is me speaking. I'm not speaking on behalf of Five Pillars. This is my personal opinion. Put pressure on them to make sure that Labour loses, because I tell you what, if Labour wins on Thursday, then that'll be an indictment of the Muslim community. It really would be an indictment of our power. And, ultimately, Labour will think, we can do whatever we want. These guys are going to vote for us until they die. We can do whatever we want. We don't have to listen to them ever again. We've got their votes in the bank. Okay, I'll end on that note, and inshallah, I'll do another big picture very soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.